been 10 years since Massachusetts made same-sex marriage a reality in this country. And in that time, the issue has gone from politically charged to a political no-brainer. But now Massachusetts candidates are finding there's a lot more to the politics of sexual orientation than marriage equality. WGBH News reporter Adam Riley has this focus report.
To get a sense of just how much the politics of gay marriage have shifted, flashback to a decade ago, when then-Governor Mitt Romney was an eager opponent.
The children of America have the right to have a mother and a father.
Today, Charlie Baker hopes to become the next Republican governor of Massachusetts. But his take on gay marriage is radically different.
You said, what would you say if your brother told you he was gay?
In May, 10 years after Massachusetts became the first state to conduct same-sex weddings, Baker released this ad touting his relationship with his brother, Alex.
June 18th, 2014, Butch and I will have been legally married for 10 years.
And that's not the only sign that in Massachusetts, the politics of sexual orientation have shifted dramatically.
It's warm out. It's beautiful. I know, I'm blocking the sun.
Democrat Maura Healey, who's running for Attorney General, is one of 3 openly gay candidates in major races this fall, along with Democratic LG hopeful Steve Kerrigan and Republican Richard Tassay, who's running for Congress. Yet that's barely raised any eyebrows, and Healey says that's cause for celebration.
Look, I think that's great. I think it's a sign of progress. I think it says something about Massachusetts, the fact that nobody's made this a big deal. As I go around the state, talking to people, getting into communities, listening to people, talking to voters, it just hasn't come up.
Like Healey, Steve Kerrigan welcomes the fact that his sexuality hasn't become an issue.
At the end of our convention, when my speech was over, my partner joined me on stage. We embraced like every other couple did. And what happened after that was astounding because nothing happened. No one seemed to care.
But if all this suggests that sexual orientation no longer packs a political punch, think again.
And I don't think there's any doubt about the honesty and the full heart that Charlie Baker has for his brother and for the gay community. He is definitely a pro-marriage equality candidate.
Sue O'Connell publishes the LGBT newspaper Bay Windows. Despite Baker's stance on gay marriage, she says he's still viewed warily in parts of the LGBT community.
It still smarts within the community that Charlie Baker, in his last go-round in his candidacy for governor, stood and used the term bathroom bill when referring to the transgender rights bill.
Then there's Baker's Democratic opponent, Martha Coakley. She fought against the Federal Defense of Marriage Act as Attorney General. That made her an LGBT hero, but not to everyone.
There is a subset of gay men, I will particularly say, who are over the age of 50 or so, who definitely remember her role both in the Fells Acres case of the 1980s, in the Bernard Barron case of the 1980s, where men were targeted and accused of abusing and raping children, mostly because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time or they were openly gay.
As for those 3 gay candidates, O'Connell says each one makes a different political point.
What Maura Healey was able to do is all of the grassroots work and hammering work that she did on the LGBT civil rights issues. She was able to really amass an army of lesbians who were there in the primary for her. Richard Tassay is a fascinating candidate. I can name 200 openly gay men who would like to vote Republican and who will definitely be there for Richard Tassay.
But if anyone represents the future of gay politics, O'Connell says, it's Steve Kerrigan.
Steve Kerrigan's a good candidate, and the fact that he's gay is really right under there, that the fact that he wears ties. It's just a non-issue.
Something that would have been hard to imagine just a few years ago. Adam Riley, WGBH News.
So is being openly gay now seen as an asset for candidates? I'm joined now by Carl Shortino, who ran for Congress last year after serving for almost 10 years as a state rep. He now heads up the AIDS Action Committee of Massachusetts. Welcome to you, Carl.
Thanks so much.
And of course, everybody remembers you from that wonderful, adorable advertisement with you and your dad when you're explaining that really you're a liberal Democrat, and everybody thinks the punchline is going to be that you're telling people you're coming out. That wasn't about gay marriage, but was there a larger message there that you were trying to convey through that?
Well, I think it actually is the case in that race and what we're seeing this year that the fact that somebody is gay is really not an issue in Massachusetts right now in politics. And that's kind of a remarkable, exciting sign of how far we've come. I mean, my dad last year, he was at my wedding last year. He's a Tea Party Republican.
Yeah.
He just doesn't care. It's just a non-issue, and people can see this as a family issue.
But that's a good point you raised, because it seems like the Republicans are still criticized more than the Democrats for wavering on the issue. I mean, Barack Obama wavered. So did Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was hammered. Barack Obama, oh, well, he emerged. He morphed into the right point of view from gay, lesbian point of view. But he was never really criticized.
If you look at the contrast, for example, between Martha Coakley and some of the candidates running. So 10 years ago, when we were fighting for the right to get married in the first place, Martha Coakley was on our side. She was fighting with us. She was defending our right to get married. Mitt Romney and the Republicans were actively working against us, and Karen Polito, as Charlie Baker's running mate, was actively fighting against our right to get married. Not just sort of questioning and wavering, but actually working against us. And that contrast in the two parties is really unfortunate, because I think there are some really good Republicans who do care about their gay family members, but when the party is so backward on these issues, then when you're running as a Republican, you are accountable to that party platform and those values. And I think it's remarkable that we are poised to have a gay attorney general, a gay lieutenant governor. We have Stan Rosenberg, who's poised to be the Senate president, openly gay man. And the world goes on, but it is important to have their voices there and our community's voices there, because when we're debating marriage equality, we're debating issues around access to HIV services, which disproportionately affects gay men, or the range of issues that affect our community, bullying in schools. Having our community's voices there and speaking out on behalf of us with a personal experience is really powerful.
All right, let's bring Kara Cordini into the discussion. She's the Executive Director of Mass Equality and the former State Legislative Director at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. You know, I'll be honest, I was a little, uncertain about doing this segment, because I thought there's this kind of assumption that gays and lesbians vote in some kind of a monolith. I have the same discomfort, by the way, on the women's issue, the gender issue. I mean, is it a reason to vote for somebody, if you're gay or lesbian, to vote for somebody because they are?
Well, you know, I think we need to look at this cycle holistically. It's great that we have so many openly LGBT people running, that they are poised to win truly historic offices. I mean, let's put in context that, you know, when Steve Kerrigan wins for lieutenant governor, he's going to be the first openly gay lieutenant governor in the country. Yeah. We have endorsed, so I will say that when he wins. When Maura Healey wins the state attorney general slot, she's going to be the first openly gay state attorney general in the country. You know, I think people, we as a community, as an LGBT community, we stand up for people who have stood up for us. So at least from the perspective of mass equality, it's not enough that you be an openly LGBT candidate that we will get behind you, but if you have been an LGBT champion and you will come to the table, somebody like Carl when he ran for Congress, you will come to the table and you will be an openly LGBT person in a room that has never had LGBT people in it. I mean, when Maura goes to the meetings of the National Association of State Attorneys General and she talks about issues that matter to LGBT people from a personal perspective, that will change the perspectives that those attorneys general bring back to their states. When Steve does the same thing in the National Conference of Lieutenant Governors, it's going to be, you know, the same experience. And so we support people who have been champions of LGBT equality. The Coakley-Kerrigan ticket have been champions of LGBT equality. Maura Healey has been a champion of LGBT equality. And it's just an added bonus that they happen to be.
What I heard you say, though, is that this is a motivated group, regardless of which side of the party they're going to vote on.
Yeah,
they're motivated to vote.
We are organized and engaged, absolutely, always.
And what about Richard Tassé? The same motivations for him? I mean, I know you're Democratic, but I'll ask you about that.
I think it's a little bit different with Richard Tassé, and for me personally, as an individual, when I think about that race, you know, Richard is a good guy, and I'm glad he's running as an openly gay candidate. He came out several years ago and he ran statewide for the first time, and that's wonderful. But when he goes to Congress, he's going to vote for Speaker John Boehner, who has passionately, viciously worked against our community's rights, and that's hard to get around for Tassé. He's a good candidate, but I think that's going to be something he has to really explain to the community.
It's interesting to me that the gay and lesbian group is so predominantly liberal, because there are still, but
it's not surprising.
I guess, but there's still a spectrum of issues. They're not all on sexual identity issues.
But it's not, I wouldn't say that the community is overall liberal. I think that we have seen a tremendous amount of progress in the last 10 years. But let's not forget, when Maura Healey becomes the chief law enforcement officer of this state, 10 years ago, sodomy laws were still legal, right? I mean, we have seen vast changes over the last 10 years, and it will be some time before the LGBT community doesn't have as one of its major platforms when it's going out to vote who has had our back. And in this election cycle, it couldn't be more clear between between the Coakley-Kerrigan ticket and the Baker-Polito ticket. Who of those two gubernatorial candidates has had our back? You know, it's great that Charlie Baker has a gay brother. We know that people who know gay people are more likely to be with us. But when you actually look at the record, you know, his first act as a potential governor of Massachusetts has been to bring Karen Polito onto his ticket, and she has an extensive anti-LGBT record. I mean, we saw the clip of Mitt Romney's leadership on you know, in opposition to marriage. She was marching in lockstep with him, opposing, you know, trying to strip marriage away from same-sex couples in the state, trying to ensure that couples from other states couldn't come here and get married. So it's personal, and I think it may override some of the other issues that people would otherwise care about.
You know, yesterday the Supreme Court cleared the way for marriage equality in another dozen or so states, and we're going to have 30 states now that are going to have marriage equality. And as Kara mentioned, you know, when Maura Healey is sitting there as the Attorney General, as an openly lesbian Attorney General, and her colleagues across the country are looking at whether they should be appealing their marriage bans in other states going forward, she can have a very powerful direct impact. You can't underestimate that. And our community, I think, looks at these candidates not just because they are gay, because in Maura's case, for example, she's had a history of fighting for our community's rights and our values.
Just on the Charlie Baker's thing, referring to the bill as the bathroom bill, that became kind of a common shorthand. Regardless of where and I know it was intended as a pejorative because it was the rights of transgender people to use.
And it was a pejorative, and he knew.
It was, but do you know what?
Yeah.
Everybody started using it because we knew what it was.
But the difference for Charlie Baker in that moment was he had a running mate. Remember, Tassé was his running mate at the time, and Tassé had been a sponsor of that bill. So that is a ticket that should have known better. And I actually felt bad for Tassé at the time that he was on a ticket with somebody who was out there talking about transgender people in such dehumanizing terms, which couldn't have been more different.
But it was like Obamacare. Nobody could remember that it was the Affordable Care Act. You know, it was Obamacare, and he began, and that was intended as a pejorative too. And the president embraced it himself to make it easy for people.
Charlie had a choice in that race, and he has a choice to defend himself now. If we look at the issue of transgender equality, our work isn't done. We still have to pass the public accommodations, which was the flashpoint of that word. So Charlie Baker can stand up today and say that he would support passage of the transgender equal access bill. If he'd like to say that, go for it.
Just memorize it.
Okay. And I think if you want to be a leader, if you want to be the governor of Massachusetts, which has been a national leader on LGBT equality, then you have an obligation to be better educated on these issues. Absolutely.
All right. Kara Corradini, Cora Shortino.
Thanks so much.
Shortini. Thank you.